So, here we are. One more visit into House of David before season 2. If season 2. I hope season 2, mostly. I have reservations that will come up soon. This might be long. Just going to go through and give my more condensed thoughts on the season as a whole now that I've had time to process them. And it'll probably still be a lengthy video, but I think less than the episode breakdowns. We'll have to see when I'm done. There really is no more ado needed. I think the best way to organize my thoughts is going to be just to analyze the different story arcs for characters that were told. So here we go. Number 1, Samuel. I didn't keep my views on Samuel to myself throughout this. He was one of the absolute highlights of the show, and I felt like they absolutely nailed the character. He was a man of God in a way that you want a man of God to be. He's kind, he's loving, he's funny, he has a joy, but he knows when to become intense. And his choices on that intensity, they're about perfect. When facing down Saul about Israel being taken from him, his choice to do so with reluctance was fantastic. He is the voice of God in Israel. He has to say what he's been told to say, but in that scene, he doesn't want to, and not out of fear of what Saul will do to him, but because of a subtext that Samuel thinks that God is wrong. He has full trust in God, but he is a human with a human's understanding of the world. In public, he chastises Saul in a way that is pointed at everyone in the camp and not just Saul. But then when he talks to him one-on-one, he does so with just love and not anger. There is one point that he does become angry, but that's when he has to confront him about the actions that led him to having to make this pronouncement, which, again, he doesn't want to do. But soon after, when he's confronted with Agag, who is evil, and Samuel knows that he is evil, he does not hold back in his righteous fury at all. When he's with Jesse in his final, real as a character appearance, he's fussing at him, but it's in a kind, leading way, drawing Jesse to the right conclusion and really only having to push him to move past the hurdles that were keeping him stagnant and from moving forward. The scenes also show that there's some very talented dialogue writers working on this show. I dislike Jesse's full arc, and we'll talk about that later, but the scenes between him and Samuel are just so good that they trick me into being okay with their existence while I'm watching them. Then they stop and I think, well, that still is happening, I guess. As for his actual story, it's pretty brief, and it ends at the end of episode 3. He's against taking the kingdom from Saul, but all of that reticence just comes crashing down the moment God shows him David's heart. He is on board now. Once again, God is right and man is wrong. Story of the world. From there, Samuel remains pretty static. He offers Jonathan some wisdom when he asks for it. He gives David and Jesse counsel as well, but he's pretty much done now and is basically Gandalf the White at this point. A+ Samuel. Good job. Number 2, David. David was always going to be the most difficult aspect of this season because in this stretch of the Bible between the destruction of the Amalekites and killing Goliath, there is very little for him to do. He's anointed, he plays the harp for Saul, he gets ticked when he hears Goliath smack talk God, and then he kills Goliath. Pretty minimal. The best way to pad this story for runtime and character growth was going to be to make stuff up. Some of it was good, and some of it was very bad. Not the worst. Close to the worst, though. It's in the bottom 3. So David is a bastard who his family is ashamed of, and he's hidden away in a field as a result. This goes into the bad. However, I feel about Samuel's reaction to it. First, I don't think you can squint hard enough to find where the Bible implies that David is illegitimate, if that's even what they mean. Bastard does have a definition of being impure, which could just mean he's only half Hebrew, but that's not really in the biblical text either. Also use it to explain why David was kept in the fields and really wound up complicating the situation. David was simply the youngest. The youngest got the boring jobs like keeping the sheep. End of story. You could have David resent it, but you don't need to come up with a tragic reason for him to be there, and you certainly don't have to make the reason one that calls his parents' morals into question. One thing that has become apparent in my many years of watching adaptations is that the most dangerous decision an adaptation can make is adding things. Adding things is where the fans are the most likely to get ticked off. We understand when you cut things. Novels have no limit on length and how much can be in them. We didn't think. Brandon Sanderson actually showed us that that isn't actually true. But movies and TV shows have limits. So when things are cut, we understand. There isn't time for all of it. We also understand when you change things. Movies are different from books. Visual is different from word. Sometimes things have to be altered for the movie to work in a way that the novel is not beholden to. But when you add things, it feels like an attack on the story that we love. It feels like you are saying this should have been there and this is how it should have been written, especially when you add things and cut others for time. Fans can think of ways you might have found some time for the cutscenes, and it starts with the writer doing something anatomically impossible with their additions. The Lord of the Rings film trilogy is just about perfect, but there are common points of complaint. Probably about half of Tolkien fans complain about Bombadil's absence. Those people are wrong. I heard about Tom Bombadil after I saw Fellowship and before I read the book, and I was kind of wondering who this person was that so many people seemed to love and were sad he wasn't in the movie. Then I read it. I was halfway through Bombadil's chapters when I thought, thank God this was cut from the movie. I was so bored. Get to Rivendell as fast as possible. Gotcha. We're just going to spend 2 days at this dude's house, though. Cool? Cool. But the changes that probably 90% or more of Tolkien fans are upset about is the addition of Faramir. Holy crap, he just accepts Faramir as a word. Being tempted by the ring, and the Ents briefly deciding not to attack Saruman. This addition problem is the stumbling block for children's stories like How the Grinch Stole Christmas and Bible stories being turned into movies. They're short. Too short for a full-length movie or TV series, so things have to be added. And you'd better think long and hard about those things. And all the things about David's mother were not good choices. Not the least of which was that there isn't anything to back any of it up in the text. David's mother is mentioned once, and it tells us that she's still alive, for one thing. I do like having him kill the lion. That was good. That is actually in the Bible. I mentioned that it did have the issue of it being shown simultaneously with Saul being stripped of the kingdom in a way that it seemed that they were trying to make a contrast between Saul's cowardice and David's courage, but I don't think it landed because the fear of man is very different from the fear of nature. That being said, it did show his courage, and it showed that God was with him, and the choice to have him injured by the fight shows that he is human, not some supernatural Marvel character. Killing the lion does lead to a lot of the flashes about his mother's death, and she's a prophetess and his spiritual mentor, and I don't like this at all. David did not need this to explain his deep faith. He comes from a family of deep faith in Ruth and Boaz, and that can last generations. But the main point of complaint is, were I a writer adapting the story, I would be very hesitant to make her a prophetess. There's no mention of that in the text, and prophetesses were very rare in the Old Testament, and I would not feel comfortable giving someone that honor without a historical reason. Another big problem is what it did to Jesse. Deciding to make David's mother, whom I don't even remember the name of, his sole spiritual influence meant that Jesse could not be any sort of a spiritual influence, and it made him like a weird version of Ariel's dad. We'll get much more into Jesse later. After that, we have the very strange decision to have David and Eliab go to the village attacked by Goliath, where David meets the king of Gath and Eliab is shot by an arrow. I have no idea why that scene exists. Achish is mentioned by name in the Bible, and he and David actually become friends later. So it may have been to have them go ahead and meet each other. I don't know why now, and even if that was why, there are better ways to accomplish that goal than threatening David with a bow and then shooting his brother. I would say it doesn't even have to happen in this season at all. Nothing in that scene leads to anything else other than Eliab has his arm in a sling for a little while. There is the implied guilt that David should feel for getting his brother shot by making him take him there, but that really only lasts 1.5 scenes. There is another accomplishment in the scene, but it really isn't utilized, and I'll come back to it later. Next, Samuel arrives and anoints David as king. No notes. That scene is perfect. I loved every second of it. David's visions, I don't hate. I wouldn't have done it, but I accept their existence as fine. Next, David is called into Saul's palace to play and sing for him because of the evil spirit, and this is in the text, and the way it was handled contained some of the best decisions and additions in the entire series. Focusing on the fear that David would feel about being called into the king's presence immediately after being anointed as king, brilliant. It makes perfect sense given the information, and I love it. Using it as an opportunity to build his relationship with Michael, also brilliant. Great use of time, and it makes perfect sense. I loved it. Having his singing not being enough and then leaving, not as brilliant, but perfectly fine. David clearly goes home between chapters 16 and 17, but the circumstances are never explained, so there's some leeway there. His wanting to go to battle the Philistines is also fine. They don't spend a lot of time on David's character in this stretch, so yeah, I'm not going to either. Once he gets to the Israelite camp, though, everything is great with him. I love all of it. His confusion about why no one is fighting the Philistines, his absolute rage when Goliath defies God, his chastising his brothers for not fighting Goliath, his volunteering to fight Goliath, and constant insistence that he can't defeat Goliath, but God will through him. His humanization by showing how he is terrified of Goliath, but he also knows that God is great. The scene with him and Michael is well written as well. I didn't love the kiss just because I'm not sure if that would have been scandalous in the culture or not, but I might be wrong. All of that is great. David gets an A-. Pretty darn good, but his grade was unfortunately brought down by his teammates in a handful of group projects. Number 3, Saul. Again, it has to be said that like Samuel, this guy is acting his butt off. He absolutely crushes this role into powder. He has that one line in episode 8 that I hated, but other than that, I have no complaints about any of the writing associated with him. His descent into madness, his pleading with Samuel, his anger, his courage, his pride, his tenderness, all of it. Saul was transformed into a deeply complex character, and showing him as a parallel of David, whew, I'm still geeking out about it. Not much to say. He gets an A. Moving on. Number 4, Michael. How much have we missed this character? The chaste, noble, kind, beautiful princess. Holy crap. Michael is a Disney princess, the like of which we haven't seen since Rapunzel in 2010. She is kind, she is beautiful, she is diplomatic, she's encouraging, she's angelic, she's freaking in love with our protagonist. I don't even remember the last time that was a plot point. Was it 11 in Stranger Things Season 2? Her journey of admitting that she wants to be with David and fighting her attraction to him out of her sense of duty. All of it's so old school that it's classic. And if you want to call it cliche, I would argue it hasn't really been used in 15 years. So the cliche is dead now. Michael and Michael's story is great, and if you disagree, frankly, you're one of the problems with society and current year storytelling, so screw you for killing movies, TV, video games, and books. Also, man, this is going to get tragic later, and I am here for it. Another A. Number 5, the Queen. I loved this character. You could argue that everything I'm about to say about her is hypocritical because of everything I said and am about to say about David's mother. She's not really in the text. She's built up and Saul is diminished. Well, let me explain why you were wrong. First off, this actress is way better than David's mom. Second, Saul is not diminished by the introduction of this character. In episode 1, we see that Saul is a competent politician and good at being king. He and his wife are established as a great team. But then Saul is tormented by an evil spirit and his competence plummets due to hallucinations and other forms of insanity. So she has to pick up the slack. This is something that is not in the text, but it is implied by the text as well as historical precedent. Saul is king. Saul goes kind of mad. A kingdom cannot be run by a madman. Dementia patients, sure, but not madmen. So other people in his inner circle have to run things instead. Making one of them the queen makes real-world sense because of course she would. And it increases the drama of the situation because she has an emotional attachment to Saul and a personal interest in her family staying in power. Add in the emotional complexity in episode 8 about why she wants Israel to have a king at all, and the incredible arc of her trust in God failing as things get worse and worse for her family, and you have, in my opinion, one of the great female characters put to screen. And again, the writing was dang good, but Ayelet Zero, there is very little chance that I pronounced that correctly, elevated this character to Lady Macbeth levels of quality. She deserves an Emmy nomination for this role, and I will die on that hill. When the Emmys are announced, I will pretend to care just so I can complain when she is inevitably left out, because if there are two things Hollywood won't do right now, they're both nominate the Israeli actress from the Bible series. She gets an A+ from me. Number 6, Jonathan.
My boy. You won! You did it!
Incredible. Holy crap. Just so good. The narrative decision to have him know that God has decided to take the kingdom from him, not just his family, but from him, because he is the one who would inherit after Saul's death, and he is okay with it because of his faith. That is a complex and interesting character that I want to watch more of. Showing someone having faith and trust in God, knowing that it will end badly for him, but believing that it is still for the greater good, that is hard to write and hard to perform, but they pulled it off. They really managed it by showing Jonathan's faith from second one. He brings it up and his desire to honor God in almost every single scene. This makes his faith in the goodness of God's plan just really believable. There are two issues with his story. They needed to better explain why he didn't try to fight Goliath. Maybe have Saul forbid him or something. I think that what they tried to do was imply via the visions that he kept getting that he thought he would die in that fight, so he was just too scared to try it. If that was the reasoning, it's a decent one, but it needed to be better conveyed and hinted at a little bit earlier. And second problem is just the whole thing of him trying to assassinate Goliath. It just wasn't good. Nothing came of it. Jonathan was just released and nothing about the situation changed. It didn't even take Jonathan out of the camp long enough for it to matter. I honestly don't know what the point of it was at all. Although it did give us a great scene that it could have been cut. Hurt to say, it was so good. Those 2 points bring him down a little bit. Jonathan still gets a solid A. Number 7, Merab. Not a lot to say. She isn't really given much of an arc, but she's a great character, and I enjoyed watching her, and I think the actress really enjoyed playing her. B+. Number 8, Jesse. Oh, Jesse. It's so not good.
Look how they massacred my boy.
Nothing about this plot works. Absolutely nothing. Jesse loves David more than his brothers, which is not backed up by the text at all. And he shows that by being a jerk to him and not wanting him around, which is not backed up by human behavior at all. He respected and loved his wife partially because of her visions, and he actively works to undermine them. And that is just the beginning of the inconsistencies in this character. Jesse is terrified of David being killed, but keeps him in a field alone where there are lions. He believes that David might be supposed to be king, but he also doesn't. He believed in his wife's visions, but he didn't. He trusted his wife's visions, but he didn't. Everything about Jesse is bad. The actor may have done his best with what he had, but it's a little like trying to figure out if Hayden Christensen is a good actor by watching Star Wars Episode 2. And what he has to work with is just insurmountable. I said it before, but I think Jesse would have been more interesting if he believed Samuel from the beginning and was actually working to get David to accept the prophecy and the anointing. I really love the idea of Jesse lobbing David into battle like a grenade. God's with you, so let's see what happens. And they decided to follow the current trend and make David's mom the awesome one. But why couldn't Jesse have been awesome too? That's really the annoying thing that modern writing just keeps doing. You can write awesome women without making the men dunderheads. F. Jesse gets an F. 8. Eliab. Oh, Eliab. He has moments. His thinking that Samuel has lost his mind and being the voice of doubt. That one's a good idea, and I enjoyed it. His fight scene in the border village is pretty awesome, but for the most part, he's not doing great. He gets shot, and that has no impact on the plot. He doubts Samuel and David's anointing, and that has no real impact on the plot. He tries to get David out of the palace, and that doesn't go anywhere. He plans to shoot David if he loses to Goliath, And admittedly, that does create some subtle dramatic tension. I'll give it a pass. So let's go back to that border village sequence. The one thing that it really establishes that could be used later is that Eliab is a fantastic warrior. He takes out 10 people by himself. It's pretty awesome. That could have been used later to show how terrified everyone is of Goliath. Even Eliab won't fight him. And that is the case, but there doesn't seem to be an attempt to give it that larger impact that it could have had. I don't remember if we're shown his reaction to seeing Goliath, and the shame of him not fighting isn't really apparent. Aside from David's one line about it, there isn't any special shame attached to his refusal. Because of what they established in that scene, there should have been moments of him refusing or weaseling out of requests for him to fight the giant. Also, just every single scene with him and David in the palace is bad. Most of what he says is complete nonsense, and he seems to be under the impression that David being there was David's idea. It just does not work, and it makes him look stupid. Another F. Number 9, Goliath and the Philistines. This is just the worst. It has no redeeming qualities, in my opinion, except for maybe the cool story of the Nephilim. Why are the giants raiding villages if they're trying to stay hidden? If the mother thinks they deserve to be gods, why are they trying to stay hidden? If Goliath and his brothers joined the army to avenge their mother, why is only Goliath involved? Why, for the love of heaven, did the writers try to make Goliath sympathetic? I am honestly baffled by every decision in this storyline. I understand wanting to make Goliath a threatening presence throughout the season, but it was not a success, and it felt like there were some disagreements about what methods they were trying to use to accomplish that, if that is what they were trying to accomplish at all. Also, more minor, and I feel weird complaining about this because I would be uncomfortable writing and performing it. But having Goliath just say, "I defy the God of Israel," and that's what gets David's dander up, is a little silly. It's honestly a nothing phrase that sounds meaningless to a modern ear if you just say, "I defy something." They should have had him say something a little bit more blasphemous. Again, I would have been really uncomfortable writing and performing that, so I understand why they didn't. It just doesn't quite work as it was done. And along with Goliath is the Philistine plotline, and that one's more frustrating because it had potential. There were 5 kingdoms of Philistines, and watching them come together could have been interesting, especially if there was an Israelite spy in their midst trying to prevent it, to create some tension about the building situation. But all of that potential was held back by spending no real time on it, by spending too much time on Goliath and his nameless brothers, and the worst actor in the series so far. Achish is so bad, and noticeably so amongst a truly great ensemble. The only one comparable to him is David's kid sister. Reuben, the survivor boy, is better than he is, and I think that kid's like 7. All in all, anytime you cut to Philistia, you knew the series was going to slow down a lot. Number 10, Eshbal and Endor. I was confused about a lot of this part in my initial viewing, but I've been able to think about it more as I was editing my videos, and now this part has me deeply concerned about the plans for season 2. Point of order first, I looked it up, and Endor was not a city of refuge, so inaccuracy there. That aside, this is what I think is being planned here. Endor is where a bunch of followers of Baal appear to have settled. They hate the Israelites for driving them underground, and they want revenge. So we have the animal killing guy working to create a war with Philistia, which is why he helped recruit Goliath. This does not explain why he wants to know who Samuel anointed, unless it's a John Connor situation. The Endor assassin with Jonathan was working to get Jonathan captured or killed. The plan goes awry when Achish decides not to kill him. Meanwhile, Eshbal was banished to Endor, and a group of rebels took him under their wing with the intention of starting a war, disposing of Saul and Jonathan, and enthroning Eshbal as their puppet king. What the handmaid had to do with all of this, I don't know. I really hope that this isn't the plan, because it's a bad idea. Primarily, it's not in the Bible, and creating an entire plot out of whole cloth is a bad idea. Eshbal is only mentioned twice, and neither of them have anything to do with a coup attempt. Secondarily, as presented, this plan is doomed for being a thing in season 2 simply because Jonathan and Saul are still alive. It really shouldn't take too long for Eshbal's emergency coronation to just be completely undone. It could be okay if this is presented as the first strike of a conspiracy that leads to the mini battles Saul and David fought together, and maybe even having the conspiracy help David escape a handful of times. But if season 2 wastes more than a quarter of an episode on Eshbal's coup, it could be a disaster for the series, in all honesty. So with that out of the way, Eshbal's performance is an A. His story, as currently known, is a B, but he looks like he might start hanging out the wrong crowd, and that could be bad for his GPA. So, in summary, the series is very strong. It has a lot of good, very little mediocrity, and just 3 really bad things, and season 2 has a bit of a check engine light on. But those faults have taken up very little screen time, and that's brought the overall grade to probably an A-. I rate it 8 out of 10 stars as a whole, with episode 5 definitely getting a 10. Well, you'll see me next time if you subscribe.